While Coast Guard families are rationing food and struggling to pay rent, the Trump administration has quietly slipped $50 million into the budget for a luxury jet, not for rescue missions, not for cyber defense, not for strengthening national security, but for Secretary Kristi Noem's personal travel, a Gulfstream 5, no less, her second one. And the scandal only came to light because Rep. Lauren Underwood decided to confront it head-on. What unfolded in that hearing didn't just expose fiscal waste, it revealed something much darker: how political power is being repurposed to serve a select few, while the rest of the system strains under neglect.
Under-resourced. The Coast Guard does life-saving work to respond to maritime disasters, combat the flow of illegal drugs, counter China, and prevent cyber attacks. I strongly support large increases to your budget, probably even larger than you've requested in some areas. But I'm concerned that this administration's political goals are shifting those limited resources away from strategic theaters where bad actors are aggressively testing American resolve. In your written testimony, you stated that the Coast Guard is, quote, surging operational forces to the U.S.-Mexico border and the Gulf of Mexico. So my question for you is, where specifically are those forces and resources to support them coming from? What theaters and missions were they assigned to before this surge? How many deportation flights has the Coast Guard flown, and why is that the best use of the aviation assets?
Ranking Member Underwood, thanks for your questions and your support. First, to answer your question about the alien expulsion operation flights, to date, since 20 January, the Coast Guard has flown 157 of those flights in support of other Department of Homeland Security components for southern border security operations. As to the other operations that where we have surged assets to the southern border, and for us, the southern border also includes the border approaching Florida and our territories in the Caribbean. Mm-hmm. That's part of the southern border for us as well. And so we took planned operations from some other areas and in consultation, principally supporting combatant commanders. I consulted with those combatant commanders and the Department of Defense and briefed the Secretary on my plans to temporarily change some of those planned deployments. Now, this type of decision is not unprecedented, and we make those tough trade-offs all the time because there's an increasing demand for Coast Guard resources and always a limited number of cutters, boats, aircraft, and crews to provide them. And so that's part of the risk decision that I make in consultation with our area commanders.
Have any personnel, vessels, air assets, or other resources been pulled from the Coast Guard's Arctic strategy to accommodate the southern border surge?
No, Ranking Member Underwood, they have not.
What about your Indo-Pacific mission? Did you reduce lift capacity in the region in favor of more deportation flights here? And are we going to be slower in building our presence there as a result of the surge?
Ranking Member Underwood, there were 2 operational deployments that I directed be changed through that process I described before. And I want to be specific about that. One was a planned patrol working for Indo-Pacific Command, one of our national security cutters, and I consulted with Admiral Paparo about that before making that change. But there's been no change in our permanent presence in the Indo-Pacific. The other change in the Atlantic, you asked about the Arctic. We had the cutter Calhoun, another national security cutter that was scheduled to support a port visit for a senior leader meeting of the Arctic Coast Guard Forum in Iceland, and we canceled that planned meeting. It wasn't an operational meeting, and so that was related to the Arctic, but I wanted to be specific and clear in my answer.
And what about the Great Lakes, where the Coast Guard plays a critical role in commerce and safety for the community I represent? Has there been any change to the staffing plans for the Great Lakes region?
There have not been changes to that staffing plan. Our presence in the Great Lakes remain as important as always, which includes our domestic icebreaking presence there.
Excellent. In your testimony, you also wrote that you are tripling the number of forward deployed air and surface assets at the southern border and simultaneously seeking total operational control of the region. It's clear strategic trade-offs are being made, and I'm concerned about the impact on your other missions. The Coast Guard desperately needs more funding to meet its mission, and the passage of a reconciliation bill is far from guaranteed at this time. And Coasties, like most Americans, are struggling with the rising cost of living. I speak frequently with young guardsmen and women who struggle to afford housing and access medical care, which is why I was horrified last Friday when we received a last-minute addition to your spend plan for fiscal 25, a new $50 million Gulfstream 5 for Secretary Noem's personal travel coming from the Coast Guard budget. She already has a Gulfstream 5, by the way. This is a new one. And so, Admiral, I have just one question for you here. Have you received any outreach, requests, or any other communication from anyone above you at DHS or any political appointee in the Trump administration regarding a new plane for the Secretary?
Ranking Member Underwood, so first of all, thank you for the support of the committee and the continuing resolution for 25. And as part of that spend plan to address the needs of our service members and their families, we're able to provide that cover the pay raise for military and civilian personnel, including a targeted pay raise for our junior enlisted personnel, which was essential. You had asked about the military command and control aircraft. So first of all, meeting the needs of our Coast Guard men and women that are doing frontline operations is my top operational priority, and it's a top operational priority of the Secretary. She's been clear with that to me, and I know she testified to that effect before the subcommittee last week. The Coast Guard, like the other military services, operates 2 military long-range command and control aircraft. This is part of our military operational fleet of aircraft. These are C-37 variants. The older one is a C-37 Alpha variant. And like a lot of the rest of our operational aviation fleet and our cutters and our boats and our shore facilities, it's old and it's approaching obsolescence and the end of its service life. The avionics are increasingly obsolete. The communications are increasingly unreliable, and it's in need of recapitalization like much of the rest of the fleet. But this aircraft is necessary to provide the Secretary, the Deputy Secretary, me as the Acting Commandant, the Acting Vice, and our 2 area commanders with secure, reliable, on-demand communications and movement to go forward, visit our operating forces conducting the missions, and then come back here to Washington to make sure we can work together to get them what they need.
Mr. Chairman, my time's expired. I just want to note that I didn't hear the Admiral answer the question about whether he was directed to purchase this new Gulfstream 5, and I just want to note that as I conclude my time. Thank you. I yield back.
The chair recognizes Mr. Rutherford for 5 minutes for his questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member.
The story begins with the very people who keep America's waters safe, Coast Guard families. These men and women operate in some of the harshest conditions on Earth, responding to hurricanes, saving stranded sailors, intercepting drug smugglers, countering Chinese operations, and protecting U.S. interests in the Arctic. Yet despite their frontline service, their paychecks often don't stretch far enough. Young guardsmen speak openly about skipping meals, delaying doctor visits, and even rationing medications just to make ends meet. Housing costs in coastal communities where most are stationed have skyrocketed. Some live in cramped apartments far from base because they simply can't afford nearby housing. Others rely on food banks, and at the very moment these families are struggling, leadership at the highest levels is lobbying for a new private jet. But that wasn't the whole story. Buried in the Coast Guard's fiscal 2025 spend plan was a line item that raised eyebrows: $50 million for a new Gulfstream 5. And not just any Gulfstream, this one was meant for Kristi Noem's travel. The kicker? She already has one. The official justification: it was labeled a command and control aircraft. But in practice these planes double as secure luxury jets for senior leaders. And when you consider that the Coast Guard is already fighting to modernize its aging fleet of cutters, helicopters, and patrol boats, the decision looked less like necessity and more like indulgence. Rep. Lauren Underwood spotted the insertion and wasn't about to let it slide. She zeroed in during a congressional hearing, her tone sharp, her questions precise. Because if the Coast Guard is struggling for basic funding, how can anyone justify tens of millions for another private jet? And then came the real kicker. The exchange was tense. Admiral leaders confirmed that since January the Coast Guard had flown 157 deportation flights, missions far removed from its core responsibilities. When Underwood pressed about the jet, the Admiral danced around the issue, offering technical explanations about recapitalization and fleet modernization. But Underwood wasn't buying it. She asked the one question that cut straight to the heart: were you directed to purchase this plane by anyone above you in the Trump administration? The Admiral thanked her for her support, talked about pay raises for enlisted personnel, and described the aging state of existing aircraft. But what he didn't say was louder than anything else. He never directly answered the question, and that silence spoke volumes. The more Underwood pressed, the clearer the trade-offs became. The Coast Guard had pulled resources away from global missions to cover political priorities at home. One planned national security cutter patrol in the Indo-Pacific was canceled. A high-level Arctic meeting in Iceland was scrapped. These weren't minor adjustments, they were signals that America's forward presence in critical regions was being scaled back. Think about what that means. While China expands its influence in the Pacific, while Russia pushes deeper into the Arctic, the United States is quietly stepping back, all so that deportation flights can continue and political leaders can enjoy secure luxury travel. And this wasn't just about planes and patrols. This moment fits into a long history of political leaders using taxpayer money for personal convenience. Scott Pruitt, under Trump, Tom Price, Wilbur Ross, the pattern is familiar: lavish travel, special perks, private jets billed to the taxpayer. Kristi Noem's record only deepens the concern. She has openly defied a unanimous Supreme Court ruling. She authorized deportations of legal residents without due process. She signed off on emergency contracts that funneled millions to Trump-aligned private contractors. And now a second $50 million Gulfstream. It's the same playbook recycled: enrich the elite, weaken oversight, and tell ordinary Americans to live with less. And when you connect the dots, a darker picture appears. What makes this scandal different isn't just the spending, it's the fear. When the admiral was asked who gave the order, he avoided the question entirely. That silence revealed how decision-making has shifted. It's no longer about mission readiness or strategic necessity, it's about political loyalty. When leaders within the Coast Guard, one of the most trusted U.S. services, feel they cannot openly answer a question in Congress, the system itself begins to rot. Transparency collapses, accountability fades, and power consolidates quietly at the top. And here's why that silence matters more than you think. This isn't just about one plane or one secretary. It's about what happens when national institutions are hollowed out from within. Coast Guard readiness suffers. Morale plummets. Critical missions in the Indo-Pacific and the Arctic are delayed. Meanwhile, frontline personnel scrape by while elites demand more luxuries. If command and control were truly the priority, why cancel strategic patrols? Why undercut Arctic operations? Why divert planes from maritime security to deportation flights? The answers point to a troubling truth: the jet isn't about security at all, it's about political image management. And when public money stops serving the public, the cost isn't just financial, it's the erosion of trust, readiness, and integrity. Rep. Lauren Underwood didn't just expose a budget item, she exposed the growing rot at the center of power. What we're seeing isn't oversight, it's overreach. $50 million that could have gone to housing stipends, healthcare, or modern patrol boats is instead being funneled into another luxury jet for Kristi Noem. And if leaders can quietly siphon off that much without accountability, what else are they hiding? The truth is simple: this isn't about serving the American people, it's about serving political empires at the top of the Trump food chain. And until more voices demand accountability, the pattern will continue. So if you believe public money should serve the public, not private power, share this video. Let your representatives know this kind of misuse is unacceptable. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button, because we're going to keep pulling back the curtain on how power is abused, because the truth deserves the spotlight.